right, today I have with me Zachariah and Andrew. And if you want to tell us a little about yourself and what project you have that you're working on, we'll start with that.
All right, Zach, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so again, I'm Zach Delaney, and I've been a filmmaker in video production marketing for about 8 years now. You know, at the core of everything I do, really, I call myself a storyteller. So I love telling stories ever since I was a little kid. I can remember that was at the core of everything that I thought and did. And we want to, God willing, bring back that traditional storytelling that seems to have been lost in a lot of people's minds and hearts and in the general zeitgeist in society. That we can look even to Christ as laying the foundation for, he spoke in parables and stories. So that's something that really we want to work on bringing back.
Yeah, so I started being a filmmaker at the age of 12. I was inspired by my grandfather. That was kind of our thing we did together when I was growing up as a kid. He would take my brother and I to the movies, and we would go spend the Saturday with him. Where I would say the turning point for me was we got to see The Lord of the Rings together. For me, I think I was 10 years old when The Fellowship of the Ring came out. My parents were very strict on ratings, but my grandfather had gone to see it, and he babysit my brother and I one Christmas. It was during Christmas time, and I just asked him what he had done that week. And he's like, "Oh, I went to see The Lord of the Rings." You know, being a 10-year-old boy, I had seen the trailer, and I was like, it's everything a 10-year-old boy would love. Elves, swords, magic, stuff like that. And I was like, "Oh, what's that about? Like, tell me more." And I remember specifically sitting in front of the Christmas tree with my grandfather and him essentially telling us an oral tradition of the whole movie. And I was just like in love with it. And by the time he finished, he's like, "You know what? When it comes out on VHS, we'll go to Blockbuster and we'll rent it." And I was like, "Well, my parents won't let me see it." He's like, "You let me handle them." Ultimately, they let him do that, and we all watched it together. And then going forward, each subsequent film that came out, we went to the theater to see. It was a special thing for him and I. After The Return of the King came out, he passed away a few weeks later. And for me, that was the first time I had ever experienced loss. And so, like, as I was learning how to grieve and all those things, like at that point in time, a 12-year-old boy trying to figure out how do you put the world back together, I actually had an uncle take me to Blockbuster, and we rented movies.
Blockbuster.
I know, right? Dating ourselves. Most of the younger generation are going to be, what is Blockbuster? But I remember renting some films, and specifically, I didn't know there was an animated Hobbit film, and ended up renting that.
The one from the 70s,
Yeah, the one from the 70s. And I clearly remember, even though I was very sad, laughing watching the movie, because in my mind, Lord of the Rings was this grand, epic, like live action, and here's this horribly animated Hobbit film, and in that moment, I just felt in my spirit like this is what I need to do with my life, is to tell stories and bring joy to people. And it's actually something that Zach and I were able to become friends on, like when we first met each other. Which is a fun story because it's totally random.
Yeah, very providential. the way we met. Yeah,
a very random way that we met. But that's also, like, if I remember correctly, your grandfather inspired you to be a storyteller.
Yeah, something that we shared is I wasn't as close with my grandfather, my great grandfather, as he was, but actually after his passing, he passed away at 97, so he lived a long, good life, and they wanted me to create a video for his funeral. Just kind of going throughout his entire life. It was kind of a slideshow. And as I'm going through his life, I'm literally watching all 97 years of his life be condensed in like a 15-minute video. And I'm learning so much about him, that he was a storyteller. My mom would tell me stories of one of her favorite memories with him was him sitting everyone around a campfire when they go camping, and he would tell these these engaging stories. He was an avid reader. He was an avid photographer. There's literally a picture of him. I don't know where it was, but it's such a 60s photo. And he has 3 cameras strapped to him and he's holding one. And he even looks like me. I'm like the black sheep of my family. I don't look or sound like or have the same interests as anyone else except him.
Interesting.
And he was a deacon in the Baptist church, and Christianity was also very, very important to him. So yeah, it was interesting that we shared that that same thing. Mhm.
Well, yeah, it's fair too to just understand that how much we are influenced by our upbringing and the people in our life, and of course, by extension, how we do the same for others. Right? It's a real deep responsibility that we have, especially when we have children. That much more so. So you don't understand until many years later, oftentimes, how much of an impact you made, good or bad. Right? So of course, we want that to be good. Is there any more to that story as far as like how you met that is relevant to
Yeah,
us?
I think it's actually like Zach was saying, providential.
Okay.
So I'm a cradle Orthodox. I was baptized into the faith. So that's been my life. During that time, my mother, however, was Roman Catholic, and it took her 12 years for her to convert. So I share this very unique path where I've seen what it takes for someone to convert and become Orthodox. But I also share like that cradle mindset of like, this is just the way my worldview has been shaped from the very beginning. So it's really funny that we met right before my son was born in December at St. George in Phoenix. St. George has a ballroom that they rent out to people who are getting married, corporate events, which is where we ended up meeting.
So it was a Christmas party, and mind you, I had just been baptized Orthodox Christian, and before this, for the the past 23 years of my life, I had never even heard the word Orthodox Christian. So everything was so new to me. I was just baptized. I'm taking on this entire new life. And my company at the time, they're talking about doing a Christmas party. And I just looked at the address and I showed up. I'm like, is that an Orthodox church? What are the chances? I'm seeing it everywhere now.
They just rented it because it was available, or
yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I got there, and I'm seeing a couple of videographers there. Then I'm guessing my boss hired or something like that to film the event. And I'm walking around, and I notice this videographer, and having done it for a while, I know to kind of stay out of his way so he can get his shots that he needs. But of course, I end up stepping in front, totally ruining one of his shots. And I notice, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. And as I was apologizing, my cross had fallen out of my shirt, and it ended up being him, and he had taken notice. He goes, "Is that an Orthodox cross?" And he pulled out his. Like, what is going on right now? Like, wow. And we immediately hit it off, because we had both been doing video production kind of as a day job and for work. So we started talking about that and some of our aspirations. And over time, that developed into a friendship and family. And yeah, very thankful to God. It's very providential.
Glory to God. Glory to God. So, what do you think is the is the catalyst to wanting to do more? I mean, obviously, you have a friendship. You enjoy doing this. You obviously have endeavors that we're going to talk about today. But is it solely because, hey, this is something we enjoy to do, or is there more to it than that? Is there a perceived need?
It's a great question. I would say where I am today, I have to look back from where I started. So I actually didn't go to school for filmmaking. My parents were like, if you go to college, we're not paying for a film degree unless you go to USC and UCLA. Did not get grades good enough to go to
Yeah.
USC or UCLA. So I went and got my undergraduate in education. But I only had classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I had Monday, Wednesday, and Friday during the day to kind of do whatever. And GCU, Grand Canyon University, had just started their film program. So I said, you know what? Like, there isn't anything that says I can't go sit in on classes. Like, I may not be getting a grade for it, but like I have all this time, and video games were getting boring, and everyone else was in class. So I was like, I could sleep all day, or I could just go and hang out with people and meet people. So I would go and sit in on all the film classes and just listen. And I ended up making some friends through that process. And it wasn't until college where I actually started to like dive into Christian filmmaking. Grand Canyon University is a non-denominational private Christian university here in Phoenix. And so a lot of their program was to help create Christian films, which was interesting to see that how that would be. Now you could make other films too. They didn't restrict you just to that. But I had another friend who I grew up with at St. George who became a filmmaker. His name is Ray Banna, a very talented individual. And he called me my it would have been junior year, because senior year we did another film. Junior year, saying, hey, I got invited to this film festival in Hollywood called Campus Movie Fest. I want to do this based off of this story from, I think it was the Syrian, it's the outreach that Soyo does in the Antiochian Archdiocese. I think it's called Yes now, if I remember correctly. And it was a story that he had been told by one of the people who had done that. And so we ended up making that film, and it took second in the nation.
Wow.
That's
awesome.
Out in Hollywood. It was, as a college kid, that was like super cool. And that changed. I was like, we can make really cool Christian films that aren't like what people see from most Protestant films. So we came back off of that, and me and the whole team were like, let's make something else this senior year. And I had a friend who challenged me to make a film where it was just two people talking on a bench. I was like, that's an interesting idea. I don't know how we can make that like actually interesting, but like let's play with it. And I remember during that summer, it was roughly around the time all the veterans were returning from Iraq at that point. And the news had a headline talking about we're going to have a whole new group of veterans dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was like, that would be an interesting conversation with, maybe it's not another person, maybe it's with God. And so I started writing this story called Faith, and it was literally about a soldier who was suffering from PTSD, and he ends up meeting someone who he doesn't expect to meet in the church after it closed down for the night. We got to film that in St. George, and those were some of like my fondest memories even to this day. Father Chris Salami would lock us in Saturday night. We would film till like 4 or 5 in the morning, clear out, and then I would go home, sleep for 2 or 3 hours, and then be back at liturgy. There's a few times I was like, maybe I just sleep on the pew and just wake back up, and I'm already at church. But I couldn't do that because I was the only one who could help lock up church since we were finished. So after I completed Faith, it was very interesting. I actually didn't do any more narrative projects. Part of that is I graduated college, entered the workforce. Time became less and less available to do that. But I also had within me, like, I don't want to make a film unless there's a reason to make a film or a story to tell. And through those years, I did end up writing a couple of pieces, and especially during the COVID times, I had more time to do that. And what I started to realize as I was writing these pieces was the stories I wanted to tell were not what the mainstream studios or distributors would ever want to put out. It just
Mhm.
didn't fit what they were looking to do.
Mhm.
And I just held on to that. And so a lot of those scripts I just was like ended up tabling. I just like
Mhm.
maybe one day, maybe one day. Um, and at that time, I had started to grow my own business, and actually, that's part of when Zach and we were focused on events and weddings.
Mhm.
And after I had a second kid, I started to have even less time. And then I had a third kid, and then it became even less time.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't have the bandwidth to keep doing events, weddings, things of that nature. And it's not, those are necessary, and there's people who need to capture those moments, but I'm not that person. I've always told myself I want to make a film. If I'm going to make a film, it has to be for a really great purpose and a reason to tell that story.
It was unfulfilling.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
And so that's where one evening I was talking with Zach, and we were working on I think we were working on a script, and I said, the question we're going to get asked after we finish writing this is, where is this going to go? Because no one's going to fund a project if they don't know where it's going to go.
Mhm.
And we couldn't answer that question. I think the following day I was watching Man of God by Jelena Popovich, and I started to just research, and I saw that she had to do a lot of distribution to get into theaters.
Mhm.
And then it kind of hit me. I was like, this isn't a story problem. It is a distribution problem. And it's been like that. And so I brought the idea back to Zach, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about more today.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to kind of his story and his upbringing too, and kind of what led him to that. Mine was actually again fairly similar. So I didn't start doing film stuff until high school, and really, honestly, I just took the film class because someone told me it was an easy credit to get it. So even though I loved storytelling, I never thought I was going to be a filmmaker or anything. Like I just liked writing stories. So I ended up taking it, and with a really good friend of mine, we liked it and it was fun. And they had this, it's called Skills USA. It was a national, actually an international competition for a CTE program. So it included engineering and carpentry and stuff, but it also included film production. So we're like, why don't we do that? And the school pays for like the field trips and travel and stuff like that. So let's go do that. And it was a 48-hour film challenge, right? So you had to ideate and create and edit, finalize a film in 48 hours, which is really fun. You have to get really creative with those kind of constraints. And we ended up getting second place at state. And we were like, wow, this is really fun. And the judges seemed to like compliment us a lot. We didn't expect that. And we were also like looking what everyone else was creating too. It's like, oh, there's a difference here. Like there's something, I don't know. We have this like compulsion to want to create. So we competed again, and we ended up going to nationals. And we didn't get first place. We got fourth at nationals, but it's still just like ingrained. And I knew that that's something I want to do. And I had a couple of setbacks in between then and now. Because for one, I'm like, I don't want to be involved in Hollywood. Even when I was like a secular atheist, I still didn't even want to go to try and break into the industry or anything like that. One, it's so much of a risk. It's really about who you know and not necessarily what you know. And I just didn't want to be in that community.
Yeah, it's more than distribution. That's what I was going to say. It's an industry problem.
Yeah.
Distribution's one element of it for sure, but like that whole, I mean, going back even Mel Gibson in The Passion, he had to produce that
Yeah,
himself.
yeah.
I mean, going back then, and there's a clear set of rules, unspoken.
Mhm.
I think everybody think it's coming out to the mainstream now, like
Yeah.
a lot of things, but they've been in operation for a long time. So
Mhm.
it's good that you're able to see that. There was wisdom there, I think, being able to see that even then.
So that kind of drove me away for a little bit in my life from working on films. And as a day job, I just did video production, events and weddings and things, which, paid the bills and helped do some things. But ultimately I was like, this is not, I feel empty after doing this. I feel like I'm not utilizing what I believe to be are gifts that I've been given by God to help glorify God again. So as I was coming into the faith, I then struggled again, saying, "Can I even be?" I was kind of having like existential thoughts, like, "Can I even be a filmmaker and Orthodox? Like, how does that work in?" And really looking into the saints and just the phronema and the mindset of orthodoxy and the church and her wisdom, it started to make more sense to me. This is possible with the proper guidance and influence and intention. You can create things that truly direct and glorify back to God. So
why do you think that doesn't exist already? There's a lot of quote unquote Christian filmmakers. What do you think is missing in the industry that requires a solution from your efforts?
Well, besides the obviously there are Christian films, and some of them, even get theatrical releases or anything. Some of them are niche. I think one of the biggest things I've noticed is there's a couple of problems. One of them,
Just be able to
I know.
yeah.
One, there's a quality, just superficial. There's a quality problem. Like they're not. They feel very. You can make a you can make a film look great with a small budget. So that's one of the things I've noticed. The other thing was kind of the philosophy of storytelling with a lot of these. I'm not going to name any names. I'm sure people could put two and two together, but from what I've seen from a lot of them is they're very exclusionary in the sense that it's almost like an echo chamber. They're just talking to the other Christians like, "Hey, look how great and virtuous we are. Let's bash on all the atheists. Let's bash on all the."
That happens in the political realm too, right?
It does.
Both conservatives and liberals, I think, have their own versions of that.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm watching that, and as somebody who is a convert, I'm like, if that was my experience with, which it was for a long time with Christianity, because I wasn't exposed to Orthodoxy, that would just drive me away even further. And I mean, it's such a, with the medium of film and storytelling, and now with online television, you can reach a lot of people and you wield a lot of influence and a lot of power. It's a very powerful tool. And to use that and not put the thought into it that, hey, this might drive people away from God, this might drive people away from the faith eventually, and not expose them to the truth that underlies everything. That's really what I noticed. And even films that aren't exclusively Christian, right? Not about an explicit Christian topic or figure, you can still embed Christian ethics and morals that we would say the source of it and the trueness of it is in the Orthodox faith, which carries the wholeness of it. So using that and embedding it in these stories, whether somebody can articulate it or is conscious of it or not, they are still affected by it.
And that's how stories always were. I mean, that's the thing about up until 40, 50 years ago. Even the, not that they were great, but the old sitcoms usually had a theme.
Yeah.
Right. And there was some lesson that you were going to get out of it. Even if it was just, be honest, don't lie or something like that, or don't steal or whatever. They all had a theme. And of course, they were downstream of things that were better. I mean, there was a gradual process. But I think, in earlier times, earlier history of the medium, you could say, there was a lot more significant recognition of the need for there to be a message involved, a good message. And now what you have is not only that, you have, of course, a bad message. It models people realize this, even if there's not profanity or, violence or sex scenes or whatever, just the whole way that the modern family is modeled, right? The whole order is inverted, right? The kids are the smart ones, and the father's an idiot, and the mom's, and everything is inverted in terms of what the family is supposed to look like. And of course, then you have alternative lifestyle people and all kinds of other things to sort of normalize all of that. So there's all those elements. But on the Christian front too, I think, not to say that this is intentional. Okay, I think they're well-meaning. We don't know anybody's heart, but I think it's fair to presume that they're trying their best. But unfortunately, what ends up happening, I think, is what a lot of these films, these Christian films, is that they almost end up being like a straw man of Christianity, their caricature of Christianity that is not only is it not appealing, but to your point, Zachariah, they actually are very off-putting. They represent it in a way that's not real, and so therefore they present an image that somebody honestly shouldn't want. If they're, if they're already there, if they already have that mindset, okay, maybe it reinforces them. Maybe that's the one good that comes out of it. But for everybody else, it's just off-putting, and certainly that's not something any of us would want to do.
No, I think one of the things, one of the motif and thematic piece is incredibly important. Archetypal characters are incredibly important. We've seen a revival of that, I would say, in the secular world from Jordan Peterson, within the Orthodox community from Jonathan Pageau, talking about symbolism. When I had really started to get into film, my Aunt Bee and Uncle Joe, they are kind of, I call him he's literally he should be the Dos Equis man. He's in his 90s and he's still traveling. But they're very interested in how things work. And when I started talking about film with them, my aunt goes, "You need to learn about Joseph Campbell." Now she's like, "Don't believe everything he says, but what he does get right is the golden thread theory of the hero's journey." And I think that's something that's really missing from modern storytelling in general, not just in film, but overall.
Yep.
And it goes to that inversion. They're taking away those archetypes that exist for a reason. They transcend time of today, yesterday, and tomorrow. If we get rid of that, then it doesn't hit home. And you can tell when people do follow that golden thread, because those films leave an impact, or those stories leave an impact. Like I was talking about Lord of the Rings, that's almost 100. It is 100 years old, almost. I think I don't remember off the top of my head when it was published.
World War II.
So it's getting close. We're only 80 years. That story is still relevant to today.
Yep.
Just like everyone who produced those stories at that same time with Lewis and Narnia, they followed that archetype, and the church gives us the perfect hero in Christ. Christ revealed that to us. The hero's journey is, as you read scripture, you see it through Genesis to even after the resurrection, when it continues on with the apostles and building the church.
And I think it's so powerful. Well, just quick note, I think another thing that's missing, which he obviously just touched on, is just the philosophy of the storytelling. And there's a reason why there's classic stories that have lasted hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I think it's really powerful. And when I only started seeing this when I came into the Orthodox Church, that the source of stories, Christ laid the foundation for not only how we should live our lives, but then in addition to that, how we should portray ourselves and portray the world as well, and portray good or even great figures that we look up to or learn from in these stories. So, and it's not all high concepts things, because God came incarnate in man and walked the earth. So it made everything very real.
Yeah, well, there's an issue of inspiration, right? I think
Mhm.
that's the thing. Most people today are not going to be inspired by an idea in terms of just in its raw form, right? They're going to be inspired by that idea expressed through circumstance or really through characters, typically in a story, is how we normally encounter it.
Mhm.
So I think that's the thing we have to realize, and we can, as a priest, that even applies to us in our ministry. If we talk about high theology, that isn't usually going to inspire people to live according to that theology, right? So that's where I see value in what you're trying to do. So we've talked about obviously what is good about storytelling and the inspiration behind that. What are some of the dangers or pitfalls that you think need to be avoided in the process of that? Regard specifically in the sense of the imagination. We know within Orthodoxy, the writings of the fathers tend to be very cautious about that.
Mhm.
How do you deal with that? What are your thoughts regarding how to produce art that is going to help people rather than potentially harm them?
I think it comes down to intent, is what we were talking about
Yeah.
actually on our way up here. Um, because it's a visual medium, right? Like, which is easy to have this kind of dichotomy. And we were talking about what makes like the explicitity of like Schindler's List okay versus like Quentin Tarantino,
Yeah.
right? And it really is the intent.
Mm.
What is it? What is this image trying to say? Like, I think it would be easy to say, well, we can't like see explicit things, have characters that do bad things, or anything like that, and play it really safe, which is what we see currently in most Christian cinema.
Mhm.
A great example would be like if somebody ever decided to take on telling the story of Saint Mary of Egypt, how do you can't like delete her first half of her life, and you have to figure out a way to show like that first half of light in an artistic way that isn't exposing someone to something harmful for their soul, um, but also not doing a disservice to like that saint story, because that's what makes her like her becoming a saint so powerful, is that redemptive arc of her going and living in the desert
Yeah.
for 40 years. If you just admit that, it means nothing. And so really it's an intent of what you're trying to show, what you're trying to tell. And that comes through not just visually, but also like how you feel when you're watching that film or watching a movie in this case.
Well, and there's I'd like to add a little to that. I mean, I think it's important for us to recognize the power of image as well, right? Storytelling is one thing, but the power of image itself or power of sound.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
In my youth, there's some things that I watched that um, I won't even say what they were. It was like I got ambushed. I was at a friend's house and they were watching. It wasn't something I chose to watch.
Mhm.
It was just there and it was on and it was absolutely horrifying. And those sounds, that image, even things that are similar, I'll hear something like that. I'll hear somebody scream or whatever, and it draws that image back up. So I think we can't ever forget that side of it too. I think the way that these problems used to get tackled 50 years ago is it was implied.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't see the scene, you would see them go into the bedroom and close the door or something.
Mhm.
It was implied. If you were an adult, you understood what was happening. If you were younger than that, you maybe didn't know what was going on, but that was okay. You weren't at that point mentally developed
Yep.
enough to
Yep.
be able to. So that's, I think, a way to. I think we have to also be clear that we don't want, and you said this already, but just to give a little more there, we don't want to put images, sounds in people's minds that they're then going to have to wrestle with. They're going to be a portal of sin for them. Um, and the fathers are very clear about this, right? The whole idea of watchfulness, right? Watchfulness is keeping those things at bay. Well, the last thing we want to do is willfully look at those, listen to those things that are harmful for us and do that damage. So I think there's creative ways, once again, to do things. There are definitely movies from of old that have effectively tackled that.
Well, I think also Hitchcock had a really good
Mm.
line of this. I'm going to butcher what he said, but the scariest monster is the one that you don't see,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
So, and you can even look at
Well, like Jaws. for example.
Yeah.
Right? Like
You
that,
don't.
Yeah.
you hardly see the shark in Jaws,
Hmm.
but because you don't see the shark, it makes it scarier.
And it's interesting. That was an accident.
It was
right?
totally an
Yeah,
accident
they
because the
kept
thing
failing,
just
right?
didn't work. Yeah, it just didn't work.
And so then they had to do the music, the da-da,
Yeah.
that literally just represented the shark, and it
And
was
look,
so much more terrifying.
well, look how powerful that was, because I mean that affected society
Oh,
on
yeah.
a large
Everybody
scale.
knows what
Was
that-
afraid
yeah.
to, well, that, and people were afraid to be attacked by a shark
Yeah.
in the water because of that movie.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just another example of how powerful it can be, and when to know when to not omit, but not when to be explicit with something, and when to use analogy, and I say analogy with visual comparison, right? Like, oh, okay, this painting, right? Which we would say, like, one of my favorite channels was Every Frame a Painting, and he had some amazing videos, essays on how every frame is constructed like a painting, and you can draw visual analogies there to get a point across. You're not spoon feeding it to the audience, right?
Mhm.
Which is more powerful when someone makes a connection in their head on their own. It's more likely to stay with them. Same thing with learning in general, right? Like if you just tell someone the answer, it's not going to stay with them. If they come to it on their own terms, on their own device, then
Yeah, I agree.
So-
That's why I deal, and I've talked about this elsewhere, but that's why I conduct my catechism the way that I do. I want people to wrestle with these truths, and a good story makes them wrestle with these truths.
yes.
They should literally be thinking about it the next day. Something that's very impactful. It should be working on them, and in a good way though, like to inspire them to be better, right? And that's kind of the last thing I want to say to this is that I think one of the things that's most disturbing about modern filmmaking is not just so much, I think the quality is actually degenerated. It's actually gotten worse for a lot of reasons. Storytelling's not there. There's a reliance on CGI. All those things that are kind of obvious.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I think what maybe is less obvious now because it's become such the norm is just how hopeless every movie is. Like it just all leads to nihilism. It's all pointless. There's no real like positive character development. It's just stuff happens, usually ends poorly, and you come out of that just more depressed. You're not inspired. You're the opposite of inspired. And there's a true inspiration. Once again, I'm not talking about once again the fakery on the other side of the spectrum. A truly good movie, it's been a trial to get through it, but in the end, right, you see the value in going through that trial, and it gives you inspiration to work through maybe your own struggles,
Mhm.
with greater courage than before, right? That's what a story should do.
It should not only should you be able to see the hero's journey, you should feel the hero's
Yes.
journey as you're watching it,
Yes.
as you grow. Like there's definitely been times where I've left the theater from watching a movie. Not so much anymore. Actually, I can pinpoint exactly the last movie that happened. It was episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I said movies after this, like it aren't gonna like mean anything.
Yeah.
For me, like I love Star Wars
Yep.
as growing up, but like if you leave a theater and you feel like my life is different from when I entered and when I left, like that is usually the sign of a good movie because it makes you think about it. And depending on what type of movie it is, it could be a different thing that you're wrestling with. But within the confines of what we're looking to do, those stories are actually painted out within the Orthodox faith. We have the saints to look towards, but even more so, Orthodoxy is unique compared to other forms of Christianity because we have visuals, we have the icons that we can look at, and those all tell a story within that single frame.
And there's beauty. We
And
can't
it's
forget the
beauty.
element of beauty. There has to be an element of beauty involved because I would say one argument, as far as the whole imagination thing is, and I see this in the confessional, when people, ideally, if somebody's at a high level of spirituality, sure, they can get to a point where there's maybe no images in their head. Okay, that's a lot of development. That is the goal. But for people that are still in process, a lot of times the best they can do is replace the bad images with good images. If someone is, God forbid, looked at bad images, which unfortunately, as we know, is pretty commonplace today, they really have to replace those with good images. right? And Orthodoxy gives us that. We have so much beauty in our churches and just in our faith in general. So I think, in terms of inspiring, beauty has to be a dimension, has to be an element in all of that.
100%.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Father, this is something I've kind of wrestled with in my mind. Because growing up, especially in the world of secularism, it was pounded into me that beauty and aesthetics are exclusively subjective.
Negative.
Exclusively subjective. And I really struggled with that coming into the Orthodox Church. And I'm like, it can be. There might be a very small element of subjectivity, but I think largely there is an objective truth to the matter that we can look to and replicate or emulate. And
the beautiful is one of the names of God, as they say, as I believe St. Dionysius gives him the names of God, the one, the true, the beautiful. And because God is the author of all things, right? Save for sin, because of course sin doesn't have true existence, right? Everything God created has a beauty to it. Sin distorts that beauty, perverts, right? It's a privation of the good. It's a lack of the good where it should be. And so that's the thing. Like, it's not that good art can't represent sin, because it is part of the story. But ultimately, there has to be a triumph over that sin. That's the thing. It's in the everything in the world now. It's so depressing because it's the triumph of evil.
Yeah.
Modern movies, really, that's what they're showcasing, is the triumph of evil. And over time, that demoralizes people, right? And with everything else going on, and maybe they're struggling with some of the things, and now they see this character who essentially succumbs to the sin, or he tries to do the right thing and he gets punished for it, or whatever might happen to be the case. Granted, sometimes you do get punished for doing the right thing, but there's still value in doing it, and that has to be represented, I think, for people to find that inspiration we're talking about. So I think when somebody's recognizing beauty, they're recognizing that order, right? That God, that divine order, or the divine ideas. Sometimes it's for the logos, right, in creation. And so there's very much an objective element to that as well.
It's funny that you mentioned logos.
I was just gonna I took it right from me.
It's like a perfect segue. So part of why we're even talking about this is there is a problem, right? And maybe one day the old movie houses and everything will wake up and they'll return. They'll turn back and repent, like they first started out.
I won't hold my breath for that.
Yeah, it probably won't happen, but anything's possible.
Anything's possible, sure.
But in the meantime, with that inspiration I had of figuring out, like, there's a distribution issue. Zach and I have started to work on a project called Logo Cinema, and it will be the first Orthodox streaming app. So it will be Orthodox Netflix. So it's going to have films like, God willing, Man of God. We would love to have Man of God on there. The St. Paisios show that's been produced in Greece.
That hasn't made it here yet. Right?
No. And actually, that was part of, as we've been working on this, my wife has been watching it. And the only way to watch it here is you have to go to someone's Dropbox and watch it from the Dropbox. And I'm like, there's so many things wrong with this, from a professional side, like a legal side, and also just like a user experience side. And that's not cool. Right now, there's a huge, like, orthodoxy on the internet is huge, good and bad. And it's continuing to grow.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be the only denomination that doesn't have its own film distribution. And that's what Logo Cinema will be. It will be stories of saints. It'll be documentaries. It'll be things like, we would love to have people create something that's equal to like a Tolkien or a Lewis, like, if the Lord blesses it, like,
yes.
Not just confining it to just saint stories, but creating things that have the Orthodox phronema that can reignite that hero's journey within that world of film.
And understanding that, of course, Orthodoxy is much more. We're not a denomination. I mean, and I know you're framing that in context of others, but the reality of it is, as Orthodox Christians, we've been gifted the one true faith. And as a result of that, that puts an obligation on us to produce art that's worthy of that. That's why we have beautiful churches, right? That's why we beautify churches. Why we don't go, some churches don't have the choice, right? The budgets or whatever. I mean, they do the best they can. But historically, we've always built beautiful churches, as opposed to the halls that Protestants use, because they don't understand they're iconoclastic by nature, these Protestant denominations. But for us, we've always had this tradition, and we have to preserve it, and we have to do honor to it. And I think it's one more reason. Like if you're going to do something, do it well. And I'm always been a quality over quantity person, and I think even if there were less that you could offer, I say we as a community that supports your work, okay. But there should be something like this. You have obviously the Catholics. They have bigger budgets. There are some Catholic equivalents of this, I think. They'll do like saints movies and things that I've seen over the years. When I was one, I haven't really paid attention, since then. But I know there were some people doing that. But even those productions were not great, honestly. I don't know that they did justice to their tradition even. So yeah, we have I don't think I would frame it a little bit differently. I'd frame it that shouldn't just be comparing ourselves to what others have done. We should compare ourselves to ourselves, like what we have done traditionally. And that should be our standard by which to do anything that we do. And if you're going to embark on this religious art and to represent it well, that should always be the goal, right?
100%. And why I was framing it in that way is to be like, it is a space. It's open currently, and we're going to fill that space. And it's not just going to be like Zach and I making films and putting it out there. It is to be able to invite others who want to participate in creating that art. And part of that issue is if there isn't a space that's going to put this out there, YouTube works, but let's be honest, it's not a user experience for the Orthodox Christian. Yeah. You don't know what ads you're going to get. You have to go hunt for
recommended videos. You need to. I mean,
it's not. It doesn't lead to where more Orthodox Christians can create this art, and something like this would allow people to create art.
And you can maintain the standards. That's my point. You can maintain those standards, which you can't do on YouTube. Anybody can post there.
This would be just like Netflix, where there is a standard of what it needs to be.
That's great.
And it also gives back to those communities. So it would be a subscription model. Like there would be a for-profit piece to this, but it's important that that's there, because right now, if someone wants to make an Orthodox film, trying to go and securing funding to create it is almost impossible, because it goes back to that question of where is it going to go? Well, now we've solved that.
Well, especially in the West. I mean, there's examples of Orthodox film and television in European countries out east, especially, but there's nothing like that in the West. It's still, even though it's growing, it's still foreign, and there's a hesitation still.
So isn't it subtitles for one thing?
Yeah.
So that's what we, God willing, want to try and push for in society. Something I kind of liked this visual in my mind. I think someone looking at the state of the world, like you mentioned earlier, Father Seraphim Rose has a really good book. That it's Age of Nihilism, right? And instead of seeing that and running away to the woods, and leaving it all behind, in my mind, I say, why don't we grab our flag, plant it, stake it in the ground, and say, no, we're going to fight back. We're going to, and this is, that's how I have to visualize it in my mind for me to, so that's kind of what this is a small part of as well.
Yeah, and we've had in conversations, and I think I talked about one of the videos I did on Roots of Orthodoxy. We have to reclaim the culture, because ultimately that's what people don't understand is that we don't live in a bubble.
No.
Right? We are impacted by our culture, and by extension, we should impact that culture. And I think when Christianity as a whole, people who claim to be Christians, as a whole, all of the denominations and everyone else, including Orthodox Christians, in the sense of looking at the world and saying, hey, there's not anything there compatible. We need to just kind of take, according the Benedict option on this, just kind of bug out and go live our lives. And it just doesn't work because the culture is not going to leave you alone.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
It's eventually going to come to your
It's
doorstep.
going to come to your doorstep, and all you did is you enabled that. And, there's a famous statement that I'm sure many have heard before. And I don't know, it's one that's it's always impacted or always kept with me. And kind of guided a lot of what I've done is, evil prevails when good men do nothing, and that's kind of how I see this problem. When we as I've said elsewhere, when we stopped fighting the culture war, we basically ceded it to the enemy.
Yep.
And now we're seeing that. I mean, I remember the defining moment when that changed. Okay, when all the mostly Protestants, Baptists or whatever, were fighting against rock music, the explicit lyrics in rock music in the 80s, and they were very ill prepared to fight that battle, and they just basically got trounced. And that was the last time I ever remember hearing anything about that. That was the last time that anyone who claimed the title of Christian put up a resistance to something going on in the culture, because they failed so poorly, so bad. And since then, it was like, okay, this is beyond us. We're gonna go surrender essentially in defeat. And now 40 plus years later, look what we have. It's taken over. I mean, things that would have been inconceivable, 20, 50, 10, 15 years ago. I mean, like commonplace now, things that people never would have foreseen, even just a decade or two ago, are like completely commonplace now. And so that's what happens. And so we should be, to your point, we need to plant that flag in the heart of the enemy and become a voice in at least the cultural dialogue, at least have our voice. Because if we don't, and Christ is clear about this, right? About being a light to the world, right? And the salt of the earth. All these things, like we are to bring our faith into the world, not hide it away under a bushel, as he says, right? We have to live our faith. And this is one of the ways I think we do it. It doesn't mean that everybody has to do the same thing. Everybody has their own callings, okay? I mean, but to whatever degree we are able to positively impact the culture, I think we have that obligation to do so. And I think that's what, if I'm going to, understand correctly, what you're trying to do.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And part of that, right? Like we do live in, like if we're talking about not running away and like having to stand where the culture is currently, like I think a lot of people don't want to talk about the logistics side. And like, that's why this is important. Is like it solves a logistics problem, and then it also ends up creates the opportunity for others to be able to create that project and be able to partner together and become one community, just as in the church.
Yes,
like, part of the
communal
other, like portion of like the business in particular is, even though it's for profit, our goal is, after like any investors are paid, 10% of that profit is going to go to not just a single jurisdiction. It's going to go to all the patriarchates to be able to continue to grow orthodoxy and do only what the church can do. Let us do what we as lay people can do, and really build the community out.
Yeah, that's
So,
great.
Not only giving back, just a final point on that, not only giving back to the church that has received us, but also give a chance and an opportunity. There are people out there who want to create good, beautiful art. We've ran into so many of those people, but their options are limited. And, a lot of the platforms sometimes can be against that or not favor that, the algorithm, right? So this would be an opportunity, not only as a safe space for, say, an Orthodox Christian family to use, and you don't have to worry about what is my child being exposed to, or even what am I going to be exposed to, right? Using YouTube, it's, sometimes, it's a toss up what you're going to be recommended, and then like it's like a shock value, right? Like, oh, I just saw that, and that's going to stick with me.
Even if you have premium.
Yeah.
Like I do. I mean, at least it gets rid of the ads, but you're right. It's still suggestions, and some of that is awfully random because I don't look at that stuff. It's still, whatever. You look at some military history thing because it's interesting, and then all of a sudden you get ads for something else that's not even remotely related. But anyway, yes.
Yeah.
I guess any other, final points you want to make, or recommendations that you would have. I guess if I had any final points, is just, I guess, to add to, like, let's stop there. Okay. One point. I guess just to confirm what you're saying, or to add a little bit to from my own experience. Everything that I've done, a lot of businesses, I've done a lot of things on the side, and I understand very well the challenge you're talking about of trying to do all of the components that are required. There's so many layers to accomplishing certain tasks. And while somebody might be capable enough to be able to do each of those things, they can't do all of those things, right? It's like you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so I think there's real value in what you're offering there, because you might have, once again, a creator who's very good at the filmmaking part of it, but all the other elements, just distribution is one, but there's a lot of other marketing, all the other elements that go into this, right, that are necessary for that film to reach its audience.
Yes.
Right. And so providing that is a huge service that allows creatives to focus on what they do well. And obviously, I'm sure you might have some of your own projects as well, but in any case, to allow that infrastructure, if you will, to enable them to just focus on what they do and to be more productive in that regard, and not get bogged down in all these other things that are not really within their skill set or interest, right? Interest base.
Yeah, I would say it takes a community. That's it's not just a small, like, even if we look at just the idea of filmmaking, it's fascinating for me seeing how it plays out today. YouTube has made it to where it's a one person who does everything, which is not the way I got started. It was me and my friends, all of us together, created it, and we shared in that. And then
it's called YouTube, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the individual, right? Like, there's a hidden thing there.
Yes. Yeah.
And it shouldn't be. Filmmaking is one of the few art forms that's a collaboration, just like music is a collaborative piece.
I wanted to hit on this earlier, but now's a good opportunity talking about community. Something Orthodoxy is, an aspect of it that is amazing, is the focus on, it's a communal faith, the focus on community. And where I've seen a lot of, I think I wasn't around then, but even going to the theater to watch a movie was a communal thing. It was a community. It sparked conversations. You talked about it. You did it with your family. It was an outing. Whereas, and part of this has to do with the zeitgeist and just the culture. It's become very individualized. But that's another attempt of ours, is to bring that communal aspect back to it, which is representative of our faith as well.
So where are you guys at in the process, and how can people support you?
So the app is currently in development right now, and if people would love to support us, they could go to logocinema.com. There's a form fill on there. Part of what we found out in our research is there isn't really a good census of how many Orthodox Christians there are here in North America.
Yeah.
And that is something the investors that we've been talking with want to know. So by you filling out that form and showing interest in making sure that this can become a reality, helps a great deal. Because then that's a hard number I can bring back to the investors to say, we have 100,000 Orthodox Christians. We know that there's more than that, but like having a hard number saying that these people are interested in it, we can then put a number on that, and then they would feel more comfortable with helping make it become a reality. The main reason why we need investment in particular is to support the servers that the app will run on, being able to license and pay the content creators who will have content on there. And as well as like marketing to spread this message like across the whole world. So that's the ways people can help. Go to logocinema.com, submit the form, and let's make this a reality.
All right. Well, may it be blessed.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father.
All right, Andrew.